issues here. And yeah, well, wonderful. Let's get started. Welcome to our Codex group meeting, our most regular format we have, where we present amazing people with amazing ideas, and as usual, we have a great lineup also today. We have Aran Kahana, who is a lawyer and legal tech and legal AI expert, and a Codex fellow, who will be presenting his work on the AI lifecycle core principles and the AI data stewardship framework. Then we have Oliver Beavers, who is the co-founder and CEO of Phosphor, which is a platform that closes the unstructured data gap in finance. And then we have Otto von Zastro, who's the co-founder and CEO of Midpage, which is a Gen AI platform for litigators to research case law. So three great presentations lined up. We have an hour for this, so yeah, everybody gets 20 minutes, but if you could sort of keep your remarks to maybe more like 10 minutes or so that folks have a chance to ask questions, that would be great. And to everyone in the group, if you have updates or questions, you can use the chat, and you can also, when we get to the Q&A portions, you can also unmute yourself to ask questions. With that, I will turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you very much, Roland. I will start a timer here, so I will make sure to finish my comments in 10 minutes. So I'll just jump right away and share my screen here. We will start with a review of the AI lifecycle core principles. I hope everybody can see this. This obviously is on the Stanford blog, so everybody's free to visit this and look through it at your leisure. So you may wonder, what does this have to do with Codex? Well, I think that we're talking about AI. I'm talking about AI from a 35,000 foot level, looking at all AI, not just things that are computational law relevant. Anytime we are building anything that has to do with AI, my idea was to let's make sure we're talking the same language when it comes to what does it mean when we have things that we talk about as principles of design. Most of the core principles, as you go through them, you will be quite familiar with most of these. And the reason you're familiar with them is because they have been written about and put forward by many different organizations like ISO, here I have a whole list of them, the G7, OECD, UNESCO, IEEE, and so forth. And there's some other core principles that I put together that are listed here that are my additions. So when we look at, and the reason for doing this is, I should preface this by saying that when I follow the different things that are being written about and talked about with respect to the development of AI applications, and applications also on the robotic side, not just software side. There's a lot of things that are being talked about that I'm not sure are very clear. And so the idea of putting together the AI lifecycle core principles was to say, this is my opinion of what these things are, but this is a compendium of many, many different things that have been written about these different types of principles. So for example, when we talk about trustworthy, which is one of probably the most frequently talked about principle, well, what does that mean? What does trustworthy map to? And it's, as I say here, and we don't have time to go through all of these, but as I say here, for trustworthy, it's a catch-all, and it includes accuracy, explainable AI, fairness, privacy metrics, safety, security, and so forth. And there's a lot that goes into what trustworthy is, but trustworthy is clearly not the only core principle that we want to be thinking about when it comes to the development of AI applications. And so all said and told, I've come up with 37 core principles. They're over the almost year, well, short of a year that I've been doing this, I've not come up with more than 37. Not to say that there can't be more, but so far 37. I don't think that there's a need to have more. But if there is, I will include more. And then there's a lot of discussion, I'm almost, for quite a while, I've been almost daily putting in notes on how these various core principles work and what they mean. And again, the idea here is to flush out and talk about principles in a manner that can be understood. And when it's understood, I think it can be actionalized, meaning companies that are developing AI, and it's not just generative or computational law applications, any type of AI, they can look at what core principles are relevant to them and then move from there to operationalize these core principles into their applications. The next, that was the first part of my comments. The next one that I'll be talking about, a project that also has been ongoing, is the AI data stewardship framework. And this one really came out from the generative AI boom that started over a year ago, and thinking about, well, how do we make sure that these applications, what is the process for making sure these applications have a quality level that can be systematized and then measured, and then when it's measured, then it can be regulated and enforced and repetitive, and have repetitive characteristics, meaning that it's not a one-off. This something that can be repeated. And so this the data stewardship framework is divided into a number of sections. There's a section that is the basic controls. It lists out what are the basic controls that should be put together in a data stewardship, what are the foundational controls, and then what are the organizational controls. And if you're familiar with the NIST cybersecurity framework and some other types of frameworks, this very much follows that type of approach. I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but here again, I'm collating and basically building something that I have not yet seen out there when it comes to how do you make sure that the data that you're using is going to be what I call high quality data. And you can peruse this at your leisure. Again, this is also on the CodeX website. And what does it mean to have high quality data? And how do we make sure that high quality data is something that is, again, not just a one-off, it's repeatable. This is kind of one of the things I enjoy about the academia is that I'd like to put things for notes and discussion, and I think this is one of the things that makes this a much richer experience. It's not just a dry framework that says this is what you need to have, but also a discussion section here that I'm continuously building that says, what are the different things? What do they look like in the real world? What does that mean? So, for example, when we talk about data governance, what does that mean? And we are seeing increasing requirements around governance, not just for AI, but also in the cybersecurity framework realm and framework also. The governance piece is a big deal. And so how does that fit into AI? And what is it that we're going to be asking of AI developers, with respect to the data that they use? So if I'm looking at, for example, we have the two gentlemen that are going to provide us with demos, and we'll be talking about their products. I think that one of the things that as an attorney that practices, and has to give advice, one of the things that I look at is I look at this list and I say, okay, what is it that the vendor is doing? Does the vendor have any sort of inventory controls, data governance? What kind of data vulnerability management protocols are they using? And then in my role as an attorney, I say, okay, let's try to bring this into a contract where we are also then building provisions that will basically say, the vendor will need to have these basic controls, and we can pick whatever basic controls are relevant. Not every basic control here will be relevant for every type of AI application. Computational law applications may have different requirements versus applications that are where lawyers are using them to provide to augment their legal advice capabilities. So this has many different constituencies. This is the idea here. And because this is obviously on the CodeX website, I'm very eager to have any people with any feedback on what they like, what they don't like. Anything goes. This is a work in progress. I don't see this ending anytime soon. And the idea here is to again give as much substance as possible to make these things as practical as possible in terms of what is a framework, but what is it from a practical perspective. And this is something that I think anybody that is building AI computational law applications can look at and think about, what parts of this are relevant. And just to kind of summarize in the last 40 seconds here before I turn it to questions, even in the life cycle also, the developers can look into the various different core principles and say, which ones do we want to pick out and plug into our application? And of course, again, computational law that's providing, for example, legal advice on not paying parking tickets. That's one of our favorite ones that we've been mentioning at CodeX over and over and over again. Which one of the core principles here are relevant to that, and which ones would be relevant to any other type of application that in the legal tech world. So with that, I've stopped short of 10 seconds, 10 seconds short of 10 minutes. So I will turn out to anybody who has any questions.
Cool, thank you, Aran. What's sort of the future for this project? Is you looking at this as something that you put up the framework and these kind of different concepts, and some links out to other organizations like ISO and so on. But as you're trying to tie it to the practical world, do you see people kind of share examples that we could then share with the community, or what's the life cycle for this project at CodeX?
Well, the life cycle is not, I don't have a specific end date for it. I think that it really will depend on how much traction it gets. And I've started to get some inquiries, primarily through LinkedIn, where people are starting to look at it more than when it first came out. Almost nobody, it was crickets. But it's getting some more traction and there's more visibility. And in fact, the AI lifecycle core principles, I don't know if that's the right term, has earned a snippet status at Google. So if you type in core principles for AI, that's what you find, which I think that's great. It means that it's the search engine at least thinks it's an important attribute. To me, it's really I would like to see the traction that has been building from the exposure that this has been getting at LinkedIn. Almost, for a while now, it was almost daily, with daily updates, daily pushes on LinkedIn. And people are starting to pay attention to it. I would like to see this be talked about, at the regulator level, lawmaker level. If I ever had a chance to testify as to what I think core principles of AI are, this is what I would use. I would reference this.
Got it. Okay. And have you been given thought to one thing that stood out to me, there are related efforts, right? And one is the one that we're involved in through Megan with the MIT on sort of the core principles or the key principles of using AI in law firms and legal practice. And they also have a sort of a matrix there. And what's interesting is there are the principles, but also the very the very specific, do's and don'ts. And I think that, like you said, you want to really ground it in reality. I think that's a very helpful thing to do, and maybe the community can sort of help a little bit with their own experience of what they think is works and what doesn't work in terms of like AI governance, so data governance and what have you. I think that would be something you could consider.
Sure, certainly. Thank you.
Cool. Well, any other questions for Iran? Okay. And what else is going to say? And is this also, I mean, you derive those principles from your practice, right? As a, well, on one hand, you're a teacher and a scholar, but you're also a practitioner.
Yeah.
And is this something that you've also, used and applied with some of your clients, or?
Yes, exactly. And that's really what gave birth to this effort. It's
Mhm.
something that when I was presented with questions about it from clients, I didn't have anything to reference. It was just too many things that were out there. They were not organized. They were not thought through by myself. I did not have the opportunity to think through what, for example, trustworthy means. Trustworthy. You can't have that kind of answer. You have to have a better answer to what trustworthy means, what it maps to, and how do you operationalize that in a contract with a vendor.
I see.
I don't want to just say you will have trustworthy AI. It's too vague. What does that mean? I want to get down to the specifics. And what this project did really was also something that I use in my practice, because I can actually give some things that are sufficiently granular so they have traction when it comes to measuring a developer's compliance with their contractual obligations, for example, in a service level agreement. So this is becoming something that I'm actually using, and that's necessity is the mother of invention, so to speak, and this is it.
Cool. Yeah, I can see that being very helpful, for folks. And because it's true, exactly as you say, that there are all these different groups out there and high level concepts, right? But, where the sort of rubber hits the road, how should that principle inform my license, my software license, or my service level agreement? That's hard to do, right? And if you can, like, help people, get them into that sort of mindset, but then give them very specific kind of examples, I think that should be a very useful resource.
Right.
And well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Aaron, for sharing, and
Yeah, thank you.
please keep us posted. And then we'll be turning it over to I think hold on, who do we have next? Oliver or
I think
Otto?
I'm next. I think I'm next.
Okay, Oliver. Okay, over to you, Oliver.
Awesome. Let me give me one moment to share my screen, and then we will be all set. Cool. Is my screen being shown? Are we good to go here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, I mean, first of all, thanks so much, Megan and Roland, for giving me the opportunity to present the Codex. It's a lot of the ideas that I'll be presenting today have, been touched on and researched through a lot of the stuff that you guys have done since inception. So it's, hopefully I'm able to do justice to, all of the work that you guys have done and bring it all together. My background is a little bit non-traditional for this space. For most of my career, I've worked in clean energy infrastructure finance. And that's a mouthful, but clean energy infrastructure actually has a lot more in common with financial vehicles like insurance or mortgage-backed securities than it does in operating like company that a private equity fund might acquire and fund. Almost everything that we do is driven around contracts and some representation of those contracts and that risk in financial models. And I was really fortunate in my career. Oh, just a minute. Looks like these ear pods are about to blow battery. Sorry about that. Can everyone still hear me? Thumbs up. Nice.
Yes.
All right, great. Thanks. Sorry about that. So most of my career has actually been, I was really lucky as sort of an early stakeholder in this space because a couple of the most experienced clean energy financiers in the country had started a new fund and tapped me as one of their first hires to come on and build the platform. Over a period of a few years, we turned this company called 38 Degrees North into what is one of the largest like distributed solar investment platforms in the country. But while I was there, I started to grow really, really frustrated at how like for everything that wasn't to do with origination or development, right? If we'd already established an underwrite or how we were sort of approaching things in a given market, I mean, 95% of my work was not really doing anything creative or problem solving. It was just running processes. And it never really made sense how all of the sort of like information in these markets had to be re-diligenced from scratch every single time you're doing something new when the overlap between projects was 90 to 95% in a given market. And so when you zoom out, right, there are really two key problems that I've sort of tried to build phosphor around, and those are an inability to set a baseline of knowledge for these markets in a comparable and abstractable way, and then an inability to really like connect together these models and contracts as the structured information that they should be. About $600 billion every year is spent in between two principles of capital, a PE fund and a developer, or a PE fund and a lender, just to sort of support a lot of these ongoing transactions. And what is really clear probably to this audience, especially as we had the ISDA presentation last week, is that when you can actually reduce work, right? Like we're not trying to say we're getting rid of all of this stuff, but when you reduce a whole lot of this work and you can set baselines, you can connect this stuff together, markets have a tendency to expand really exponentially. And so the problem that we've sort of tried to figure out is like, what would efficiency look like, right? What would it look like to take a lot of these sort of legacy constructs and information and patterns, and to create a really all-encompassing solution that really kind of enabled like a little bit of a paradigm shift for how capital markets actually work. We've built Phosphor around 5 principles that, I mean, have been really hard to solve, right? So if you think about Excel as the representation of the numbers and Microsoft Word as the representation of the contracts, in order to really create something that is a little bit genre defining, you have to solve it across 5 points. The first is abstractability. One of the things that ISDA was able to successfully achieve was it was able to abstract this very large amount of information into a standard that the derivatives and the swaps markets could actually work against. In Word, you can do that, right? You can create clause libraries for a lot of these contracts, but you really can't do that in the spreadsheet language. Comparability, right? You can, to some degree, you can compare contracts, but what if you could take it way further than just tracking changes, right? What if you could actually compare real legal intent, sorry. And then observability, and maybe Word is a little bit better on this, but all of these things, you know, in Excel, the models that you actually close on are exhibits to every single financing that we did. These are just as much of the legal artifact that determines how processes are repricing or debt amounts get finalized as the contracts and the logic in the contracts, as the definitions and the logic in the contracts themselves. Where these two items do work, like Excel and Word do really well, is that they're flexible, right? With Word, you have the full flexibility of the English language to actually encode these contracts and these processes. And in Excel, you have a spreadsheet as a canvas that you can link things together. And so this really, like, the focus is these. We've seen a lot of black box solutions that are very market specific, but for any of the markets that I've ever worked in, that black boxiness where something is specific to an asset class really hasn't ever worked for any of the key workflows around structuring and carving out and negotiating the actual terms and the logic. Lastly, something that CodeX has been pretty responsible for has been the statefulness and the computability of these workflows, right? So like, what happens if contracts become the software as opposed to needing to build software around them? At Phosphor, we have spent probably about 3 years trying to figure out how to solve all 5 of these points in a completely integrated way across the model and the contracts themselves. And so really, I mean, we've touched on all of this already, but Excel and Word are sort of the last remnants of digital finance 1.0. You can't connect things together. You can't really version any of these sorts of documents in any cohesive way. You can't compare them, and you can't really enable a lot of the promise that AI stands to have without any of these sort of core principles that you might actually achieve. And so the first big insight that took us quite a long time to get to is that all of the information that goes into encoding or analyzing or processing these assets is actually inherently structured. And today we lose a lot of that structure in this encoding step as we translate that knowledge, whether legally or analytically, into these old forms. We've identified this as a linguistics problem, right? It's the font of a broken system. So this bar here is a spectrum of semantic meaning, right? To what degree can you understand the language? Over here on the left, I76 times D83 has no semantic value at all. You don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. And AI doesn't know what that means. All of a sudden, you're breaking a lot of these principles of abstractability or connection in any meaningful way. And separately, in the natural language view of the world, you have the full semantic value of the English language, which kind of breaks any computer friendliness or ability to represent a lot of these process specs that contracts define as structured information that you can really do a more fine-tuned comparison with. And so what we've done is we've taken Excel's language and we've given it semantic value by representing everything that you would encode in Excel as a shape, a single cell or a row or a column. And all of a sudden, when you can do that, it becomes database friendly and connectable. Separately, building off of a lot of the research that's occurred at CodeX and in Singapore and in London, we've taken these contracts and worked out how to actually make them computer friendly and compilable without sacrificing the flexibility that you would otherwise need to have to draft a fully encompassed, an all-encompassing sort of contract. And so what becomes really interesting to think about is like when this is solved, which we have, like we've successfully linked these things together behind the scenes and are actually building our first products to bring to market. It's really kind of nuts to think about what you can actually do with this. When you can represent this last bastion of unstructured information and data as completely structured and connectable and abstractable and comparable information, the questions that you get to answer are really they're completely different from anything that's ever really been askable before in the first place. And so that's, I was going to show a demo. I'm sorry, I forgot to set off my timer, but I don't know where I am on that, but I think I can just go to questions. And then if during that time we'd like to see a demo, that's totally fine too.
Yeah, I mean, yes. So does anyone have any questions at this point? So I think, yeah, so what it would be helpful to kind of bring it down to the level of like a specific documents and what it is, how do you bring your kind of sort of secret sauce to it? And yeah, so if you have a demo, that'd be great.
Yeah, totally. Let me see if I can share. So this is just a design, but behind the scenes, we've, a lot of the language work that we've done on the legal side is based off of L4, which was developed, I think, by another CodeX fellow over in Singapore. I can't show the financial model side of this because it's between two applications, but what becomes so incredible when you make these contracts stateful, for example, is that you can still take clauses like the power producer must deliver power, create a state change, and then link it up directly to an API. Right now, at the firm that I helped build, we have a team of people that work around like trying to tie payment gateways to power amounts and everything else. And so this is one of those examples of these contracts actually being the software themselves, as opposed to trying to build leasing workflows or everything like that around them. One of the other things that's kind of unique about representing contracts as this sort of dependency graph structure is that a lot of times when you think about AI and processing the unstructured information that you get in a PDF, right? A lot of times you'll incur a lot of hallucinations because behind the scenes, you have to trust that this AI is actually like accurately representing a lot of this logic before it actually summarizes and inquires against it. When you're able to represent contracts as this sort of dependency graph structure behind the scenes, you can eliminate a ton of those hallucinations just because you're asking the AI to effectively walk up and down this dependency structure that already exists in order to actually query this stuff effectively and provide trustworthy results.
Cool. And so Peter's asking if you're parsing language or if you're assembling this from blocks.
Well, I'm not sure I totally understand what that means. What we're doing is we've built off of, and we're working on our own sort of version of this, but we've built off of what's called a domain-specific language, which is where you encode a lot of the legal logic in a computer-friendly framework and way, so that you can define what might be a variable and what might be, the dependency of each piece of the logic. And typically, when you do this the right way, you can almost always go back out to the more traditional world of like an unstructured legal contract that you've grown accustomed to, right? That's sort of one of the benefits of being able to, like, when you start from a place of structured information and logic, you can always go back out. One of the big questions that we're sort of working through right now from a product perspective is how do we not necessarily ingest in existing contracts, but what would it take to actually bring a whole lot of projects and their development online purely through this more structured manner? And so that's some of the stuff that we're working through with initial customers, so that you can still go back out.
You would start from a clean slate, kind of. You have to have an idea from your customers. What would be the modules you want to make available.
100%. And so a lot of the initial testing that we did was around an existing market standard in renewable energy called the Solar Energy Industry Association's Power Purchase Agreement and Contract. And so as we worked out the corners of, we initially tried to build our own V1 of these DSLs, discovered the entire body of work that's gone on over the last few decades, and explored a whole lot of that. But a lot of the initial work was building out a full solar project finance model, and then representing some of the key contracts one-to-one as, in this more structured way using these DSLs, and then actually seeing, where the boundaries were and where you could actually achieve this, right? This is a totally different view of what you'd think of as a contract, but it's just the start for where we think we can actually take this.
Yeah, I think it's cool to see. So as we're particularly focused on the insurance industry at the moment and bringing a computable contracts approach to insurance contracts. And it's interesting to see how, other verticals, in your case, solar, renewable energy markets are trying to use that, because it just makes so much sense, right? It will really, so much time is lost in the old way of contracting, And once you have it in this computable format, then you can, as you say, operationalize it and trigger alerts and all that. So it makes a ton of
100%. The main the computable aspect of it and the stateful aspect of it that I think you're referring to for the insurance stuff, and even what I've just shown you here, right? That's almost when you can effectively represent this stuff on the front end. And I don't have like a visual demo for this, but if you can enable, if you go fine-tuned enough in the document comparison, down to like the sentence level sort of comparison and how you actually think about taxonomizing and making a lot of this information comparable to start, a lot of the computation actually like winds up coming for free because you've worked through that logic formalism to start with. And so that was the initial problem statement that we had, right? How could we take a set of project documents that were drafted by completely different lawyers, compare them to something that we actually knew, like what was the granularity of the information that you had to represent there? And when you actually go way down that rabbit hole, you find that as you try to work through how to represent that information, you can kind of make it stateful and computable as well with a lot of the other innovations that have been researched for so long.
Right. So Diego is asking about, how enforceable is this in case of a dispute?
Yeah, totally. So we're not doing anything that doesn't generate back out to the old world, right? This is the realm of smart legal contracts. We're not doing anything on the blockchain at all. We're just representing this stuff as information. And I mean, to the extent that you need something enforceable, I don't know what the precedents in the US are actually for contracts as code, but I know that the UK courts have done a pretty extraordinary amount of work on that, especially over the last 2 years. And I think just a couple of months ago, they've been given the green light on like trade documents. But in the US, I'm a little bit less aware of how courts have thought about precedent and satisfying a lot of those legal obligations.
Yeah, so we had Professor Goodenough, who's affiliated faculty with CodeX and very involved in our computable contracts research. I think he worked with a PhD student, Beatrice, who's been a visitor here. She's taken an inventory of sort of the legal frameworks in different countries on enforceability of computable contracts, and it would be maybe it'd be a good session for us to hold at some point. But I feel like, sort of the sense, I haven't really read through that work yet, but the sense is that, the question is, what would be if there's like a computable version and a human readable legalese version, and there's a discrepancy between the two, which one controls, and how is that interpreted? And yeah, I think, it's a good idea to maybe share this kind of research with this community. Maybe we'll send something out, maybe have a session or something.
I think that'd be a really cool session, just because it'd be really interesting to see, I think, how it compares to, I mean, as you guys are probably aware, right, the High Court in the UK wrote had a 200-page like dossier commissioned in 2022 on the exact legality of smart legal contracts as opposed to blockchain smart contracts. And so it's really cool to read through that and see how they're thinking about that. But I don't have, like, I'm not a lawyer, right? So I haven't, we've tried to solve a technology problem that started with just comparability, right? Like, how do you go hands-free and say, here is, a massive body of information. How do I get it to where I only have to focus on what's different? The computable stuff comes after that for sure, but that initial problem statement is more around underwriting automation than it is, statefulness and asset management.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Well, awesome, Oliver. So so we should turn it over to our next speaker, Ray. Well, thank you so much for this update. Just Peter added, a point, because you talked about domain-specific languages, and he shared a link to the Strumenta community for all things DSL. So if folks are interested in those domain-specific language area, should check it out. And yeah, Olga is saying, yeah, it'd be good to have a session on computable contracts enforceability. Absolutely, we'll put that on our list. And yeah, with that, thank you so much, Oliver. And let's turn it over to Otto.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks a lot from my side as well. This is now the second time that I'm here. Last time was in March. Back then we were a very, very young company. And I have both a demo, and I also want to talk more in general sort of about how litigators will interact with the legal cases to do legal research in the future. And so not only focused on how we're doing it right now. And of course, the main problem setting being that over 10 million cases are filed each year in the US. It's actually significantly more than that. And ChatGPT is amazing, but of course, it's not good at solving this problem out of the box. And yeah, again, the question of what is the right interface going to be? And I'm strongly convinced that this is going to be changing quite rapidly, with every new generation of language models. And I think every time the legal tech community then has to catch up a bit to build a new interface on top of the new language model every few months when it comes out. And just a bit of background about us. So we build a platform that does research across public case law. Like the classical case text or Westlaw, just that we built it from the ground up with language models. And also we help the litigators take that and organize it into notes and turn that into a draft. I think there's a lot of value in combining these different tasks because, of course, if you're writing a draft, you don't want to press a button and get a whole document generated. You want it to be based on the research that you've personally done and approved of in the research steps. And yeah, we have launched our beta in August and have over 5,000 users on it now. Some of them are from Stanford, so some of them are students. Many of them are smaller practices and with a big focus on litigation, of course. Now, and our team is split between New York and Berlin. I actually spent most of my life so far in Germany, and I was working in a similar lab to Stanford CodeX, like the European version in Zurich at ETH with Elliot Ash. I think it's a bit less well known than this one, but he got me set into this direction. And I had many friends that were lawyers that when they converted from being at law school to their first jobs were really complaining about how repetitive some of the research tasks are that they get. And so this is really why we set out to solve this. And Midpage was started in December last year. Back then, I was alone, and since then we built this team full of ex-engineers and litigators. Yeah, and so the first thing I want to start with is sort of more and more open-ended. I see like lawyers are not typically the fastest adopters of new ways of doing things. They're still using Word, and the tools haven't changed that much over the past 3 years. So it's kind of different to other industries that are slightly faster paced. And this kind of dictates, that's one of the premises for which to start the discussion of which interfaces are right for them. And there, one of the conclusions I've drawn from that was it's good if they're very proactive. So if you have a tool that can run in Word, it's not only you can go even further than that. That's already good because it's embedded where they already work. But if it is also proactive, if it makes suggestions while you're interacting with the text, instead of waiting for you to understand, oh, this is this one scenario where I can use some tool. The proactivity will help people really adopt new ways of doing things much more than without. And I'm going to show this in a second with Midpage. But the second thing is connecting across tasks. And I mentioned this already, that imagine you spend several days of researching things and you have these huge pile of snippets that you copied over from cases. And when you want to use generative AI to turn this into a draft, if those two things have been on two very different platforms, then there's little synergy between the two. So not only are we bringing this all onto one platform, but also we're building a layer of extensions, of plugins that can connect to Word, they connect to your browser, and they can follow you along at all these different places where you're already used to interact with legal text. And this enables to do things that we couldn't do otherwise, to make suggestions in the drafting based on your research. And this also means that since lawyers are used to working with many different kinds of platforms, maybe the arbitrators use something like Mundi, and smaller practices use different tools, and larger practices And by having some layout browser extensions, it's actually possible to do research across different platforms at once and bringing it all into one pool of research. So now I'm just going to share a demo of what we have today. Okay. So this is Midpage. This is our website, and you can read a case here like you can do on many other sites. And one of the problems we noticed with research today is you'll come across many of these case references. And after a few hours, you'll have 100 open tabs where anytime you come across something interesting, you'll add another new tab. And while digging through some research question, you lose all the connection. Where did this even come from? Why did I open this one if it's an hour later? And one of the small things that our users have been using thousands of times is actually just as a preview, seeing a small summary of that one case. And then if you like it, you can add it to your research collection. And this way, you have everything organized in one place. And you can then later group them by argument or understand where they came from. And the cool thing is I can do this on Midpage, but I can also do this on any other side. So anywhere where there are cases. This, for example, is CodeX, and I could just hover over some case citation and I see this summary. And not only do we show summaries, we also have many more tools to explain, since we know which case you're working on, because you can sort of give us that information. We can help you understand how does it fit into your case and which parts of the case should you look at first. This is what I'm going to demo next. So when you at Midpage, we have this tradition that since I'm actually a computer scientist, not a lawyer with background, similar to many of my team, every week we get one research task that James, or the former litigator in the team, comes up with. And the one from 2 days ago was about a copyright infringement case. And it's a super good practice for us to run through using our own tools or using existing tools to actually learn how to do this. Because we're building a new sort of UI interface for that. And this is best done through the eyes of a user. Now, as a first step, we built a case search that can search all the 30 million public case law that people typically have to use for precedents. And this search is very different than what existed out there before, because for the first time, it can take any kind of notes in background of your case and re-rank the search results based on that. And now when I look at these lists of cases that I get from my copyright infringement case, I will be able to see things that help me decide which of these is relevant and which isn't. So I can, for example, for this one, I can look at the outcome of the case, and maybe this already tells me that this case would be supporting the other side. It's actually quite a good one. Similar to this one. So you get like a first glimpse of which cases you should be looking at. And there are several examples of how you can do this. One is just understanding, okay, this case supports this side and this is this type of motion. But what I'm showing here is a fact comparison, which is one of the features that people are using quite a lot. Since I pasted in some background of my case, it can now just go ahead and compare what things are similar in this incredible technologies case that I'm looking at. And if we read this more closely, it says, okay, both cases were actually about some computer game, and in both cases there was a copyright issue. However, and one of the distinctions is in this case that we're looking at here, it was actually not about so the actual element that is where the copyright protection is on is actually very different. And in our case, the timing was quite crucial, whereas here this didn't seem to have mattered very much. In our case, the reason why the copyright claims ultimately should be dismissed is because there was a huge gap between when they published it. And then here, this is actually a key difference. So I can just jump into this case, into that section, and decide that this is something I want to look at. Now, somebody raised a hand. I'm happy to answer questions right away while we're showing this, but of course, there'll also be time at the end. Sugam, do you want to speak now?
Maybe later, you can continue. Sorry.
Okay. So there's several examples how we help understand which cases are relevant and which aren't. And this is crucial because as a lawyer, anyone that you miss could be, used by the other side against you. So we want to help them dig as deep as possible. And apart from helping them define cases, it's quite helpful, which I also noticed yesterday when I was researching for this task, to be able to sort of mark different things, like you'd already be familiar with, and then have language models to organize this content for you. So you can then group them by argument. You can later understand which things are new, which things you've already seen before. And this is, the cool thing is that it automatically takes care of all this note-taking with all the citation rules, while you can focus on actually reading and understanding the text. And you can decide what is good enough to be included later. And now that I've marked a few things and I've saved some cases here, I can look at my research collection. And in this, I have, for the first time, a very transparent and state of my current research that includes all the notes that I've looked at so far. And this is great for two things. I can either share this directly with colleagues, export to Word or share via link, or I can use this as a basis for drafting. And the cool thing is that I've added some cases in here from mid-page, but I could have also been doing research on a different platform and adding cases into here as well. Now, when I draft, what the problem with drafting today is that it's actually quite tedious to go back and forth between all these, hundreds of cases that you might have looked at in the past and find, the right sections again, and maybe you've copied them into Word so that you have your own repository. But that's still quite a mess to work with. So what we do in mid-page is we don't want to write the whole document for you. Language models shouldn't take away the control over the structure and the narrative. So I'm still writing this document, but I can use it to write a single paragraph maybe based on my research. So here I started an email to my partner, and I can say something like, use my excerpts, maybe from anything related to So it can automatically find which of the things that you marked are relevant. And it could have also said only use the things that were related to the attorney fees or something like that. And then it's going to add all the formatting and all the citation rules for me at once. This is text that I could share with my partner directly by just sending it over into an email. All of this is backlinked so that they don't have to have mid-page, but they still get this high quality transparency because of the links in there. And maybe since I'm not really done yet, I can do something more like maybe something like this. And then you can quickly get into a state where this tedious part of going back and forth between your excerpts is taken care of by the language model, but you're still in control. And I said it's important to insert this everywhere people interact with legal text, right? So I could have done the same drafting here with Word using our plugin. It's not released yet, but we'll be there soon. And then in this Word plugin, again, I have access to the same research collection that I've built already. And I can use maybe Microsoft's Copilot in addition with the mid-page one. Those bots will be talking to each other in the future, and that's going to be very cool to see. And when I say future, I mean in January. And you have access to all the same information, and we can also show the same, same summary pop-ups, sort of making citations interactive in the same way across many different platforms. And I think that's going to be a very interesting shift where we suddenly have, and I'm sure we're not going to be the only ones to do this, we suddenly have something like Grammarly. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's like this auto-correction suite of tools where anywhere you type text, it will make grammar correction suggestions. And this is kind of what we want to do with legal text as well. This goes across browser and Word, but also actually into ChatGPT. Our ChatGPT plugin was more of an experiment initially, but people are actually using it quite a lot. We have, I think, 250 users per day on it. And that is a very different interface to what you see here, but it has access to the same data. It inserts the same links, and it sort of allows you to do some of the same features here as well. So that was all I want to show for the demo.
Cool.
I do have How is it on time? When did I start actually?
So yeah, so there's 5 minutes left, and we want to make sure that we get people to ask some questions too.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. I was going to share some more thoughts about interfaces, but happy to jump directly into questions.
Cool. Well, maybe we give the first one. So Shugam has had his hand up for a little while. Maybe give the first question to Shugam.
So, do you have these case laws housed in your local repository? And
Yes.
where do you get it? Where you get it from?
That's a great question. So even when we are using our browser extension on CaseText, we're actually using our own data to do all the interactions. And we have a database of, right now it's around 30 million cases. And those are all, US case law, federal and state law. I'd say we have around 99% of everything that is like of reasonable importance. So if you're in a very big law firm, there might sometimes be some cases from some weird local courts that we don't have. But for smaller practices, this is more than enough. And we hope that by May we'll have everything.
So where did you get those cases primarily at the first hand?
Yeah, there are two main sources. One is just scraping the actual court websites, which is how Lexis and Westlaw get the data. Well, that's one of the ways they get the data. And the other way is working with the Free Law Project, which is sort of our data provider. And they have the website called Code Listener, but they're also working with many different entities too. They have their own scrapers, and they've also just scraped the courts.
And the last question, do you have these case laws from the lower court? Those cases from the lower court, like district court, or
Yes.
only the high court, Supreme Courts?
Yes, no, we have almost all courts. I mean, I think we have all courts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think you answered Marcy's question. Oliver was saying, awesome work tying things together. What a huge design space. Yeah, I was also gonna add. So what I think is cool is how thoughtful you are about the workflow of lawyers and how they do research, and so the need also to distinguish between a case holding and your actual case, right? To like see what's similar and how are they differentiated. In when you ask the machine to sort of differentiate, which one of the things you showed, are you relying just on the LLM to do that based on its best assessment, or do you provide it with like legal knowledge in a sense of like having legal context about what are the dimensions to choose when you differentiate a case?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. So first of all, what is very important to us is that to always show excerpts from the original text, so that this gray part here that is written by the language model, but then this blue part that is an excerpt from the real text, and you can click on it to see in context what this actually means. And this is really helpful to, you don't have to trust the system. You can assume that it's wrong sometimes, like your junior associate also will come up with crap sometimes. And yeah, but it's actually very helpful information, and our lawyers, our users are very impressed by the quality. And we do have some level of checks, quality checks, where we make sure that it's working well enough, and we haven't had any complaints about hallucination yet. But in some sense, it is just the raw intelligence of the model that is providing most of the value here. And
okay, but so you're offset. So you, in terms of like explainability, in a sense, you are making it easy for people to drill down to the actual text, and then they can sort of verify in that sense, like, oh, did this model differentiate this adequately, or so the human expertise will still, play a role. In a sense.
Exactly, yeah. Because what we don't want to do is have a sort of chatbot where I can ask a legal question and I'll get a full answer with maybe 5 different cases. If I don't have a good way of verifying every single step along the way and understanding, really closely about what process I got there, then the answer is not really useful, because you don't know if you can trust it. But what we use it for is more like helping them to find the right section quicker, and helping them to not overlook any like crucial details about a case.
Okay. And then we're at the end of our time, but maybe if I could ask, you and maybe Aaron and Oliver to maybe just put in the text in a chat your contact info. That would be great, so that if that folks could like follow up with the questions they had that didn't get answered now, or future questions that they may have. But also, Otto, this is really awesome and so interesting how you combine the power of Gen AI and make it immediately useful for practicing lawyers. And so thank you so much to all the three of our speakers today. It's a great session again. Really appreciate the diversity of projects that we can showcase here, and the cool work that's going on out there. Thank you so much for sharing it with our community. And gonna ask Megan to quickly let us know if we have a session next week, because I'm not sure.
No, this is the last of the year.
Okay, well, great. Well, what a great way to conclude our CodeX group meetings session. It's been a fun year, and what a year it has been. And we met so many amazing people in this community that came through these group meetings, and our other events on campus here at Stanford, or our online events. And so yeah, please keep us in the loop on what you're working on. You're always welcome to present your work in this forum. This is I think a really tight-knit and important group for the center. It's sort of our little brain trust that we've built around the center, and we're always excited to showcase cool work. And thank you all. I'm sort of on behalf of everyone, I'll give you a round of applause, and I wish you all a sort of nice kind of landing of this year. Hope you have a relaxing time and get recharged, and really looking forward to what this group is coming up with next year, as I think we're in a very good position to really have some impact and change out there for the legal system, and to make it more accessible for everyone. And so thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks so much.